The desert still slept when Commander Merritt Callaway arrived at Hangar 14. Dawn had not yet broken, but the floodlights carved the night into silver and shadow. Her boots echoed along the concrete floor, measured, precise, almost too quiet for someone who used to walk with the rhythm of afterburners. She paused at the entrance to Bay 3. Inside an F-35, a sack cocooned in scaffolding and cables, its matte skin catching the pale light. The aircraft looked alive, like some great predator held on a leash. A smell of hydraulic fluid and cold metal hung in the air. She signed the maintenance log. Hands steady, though her heart pulsed harder than it should. Logistics work was supposed to dull the edge. Routine reports, supply manifests, nothing to stir the blood. But every time she saw that airframe, her muscles remembered how to fly. Still haunting the flight line, "Commander?" The voice came from behind her, amused and sharp. Callaway turned. Captain Eleanor Winters stood in the doorway, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, eyes assessing. Winters was younger by a few years, sharp-minded, trusted by the base commander. "Just checking the transfer numbers," Callaway replied. "At 0400? Winters arched a brow. "Couldn't sleep." Winters gave a knowing look but didn't press. "Briefing starts in 20 minutes. The new SEAL detachment's here for cross-discipline integration. Commander Riker's leading it." Callaway stiffened before she could stop herself. The name hit like turbulence. "Riker?" Winters nodded. "You know him?" "Not personally," Callaway said and walked past, hiding the micro-flinch that betrayed her. Outside, the desert wind carried the first hint of morning. Cool, clean, almost gentle. Callaway adjusted her collar and made her way toward the operations center. Behind her, the F-35 loomed in silhouette, wings outstretched like something remembering flight. The conference room buzzed with low conversation when she entered. Marines, aviators, analysts, all mid-ranks and up. At the far end stood Commander Riker, broad-shouldered, in desert camouflage, confidence radiating from every motion. His voice carried easy across the room as he spoke to Captain Winters. When his eyes met Callaway's, they registered nothing, no recognition, no memory of the woman who had once broken protocol to save his life. Why would they? 3 years of classification buried that day deeper than any medal ceremony. Riker gestured for attention. "Let's settle in, people." Chairs scraped. Callaway took a seat near the back, unnoticed. "This program," Riker began, "is designed to fuse tactical ground operations with aerial support, precision, timing, adaptability. We'll be testing how pilots handle real-time deviations under pressure." He paused, scanning faces until his gaze landed inevitably on her. "And since we have a logistics officer among us, perhaps Commander Callaway can tell us how we plan to handle aircraft that don't follow orders." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Callaway didn't blink. "Aircraft follow data. Commander. Pilots follow training." Riker smiled thinly. "Training that sometimes ends in disciplinary review, I hear." The air cooled. Winters shot Riker a look, but he ignored it. The jab hung there, deliberate, a test. Callaway met his eyes. "And sometimes saves lives." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Something in her tone, calm, measured, but lined with steel, shifted the balance. Riker studied her, as if seeing more than her uniform. Then he looked away. "We'll see if that philosophy holds up in simulation." Hours later, the hangar was alive with preparation. Mechanics shouted across bays, tools clanged, jet engines coughed awake. Callaway watched from a raised platform as the first F-35 taxied toward the runway. Riker approached, helmet tucked under one arm. "You'll be in the observation booth?" "That's the assignment," she said. "Shame," he replied. "I thought maybe you'd like to show us how a logistics officer handles a real bird." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. Riker leaned closer. "Don't take it personal, Commander. We just like to know who's teaching us." "Then watch closely," she said, turning away. He watched her go, something unsettled stirring beneath his confidence. The simulation began with 4 aircraft ascending through the glare of mid-morning. Callaway monitored telemetry on a wall of screens. Altitude vector, thrust modulation. Riker's team coordinated ground movements, from the adjacent control bay. Falcon 1, your vector's wide. Callaway called into the comms. Static crackled, then a reply. Correcting. Suddenly, one signal spiked red. An electronic jamming pulse. Part of the exercise, but stronger than expected, hit the grid. Systems froze. Telemetry's blind, someone shouted. Callaway's fingers flew over the keyboard. Manual override optical feed, now. Riker's voice cut in. Ground teams exposed. We need extraction data. I'm on it. Her eyes locked on the screens. Every motion automatic. Instinct overriding hesitation. She rerouted through auxiliary control, bypassing the blocked frequency. Numbers reappeared, blurry, unstable, but enough. Falcon 2, just 30 degrees south, dropped to 300 feet. You'll see smoke markers at grid 12-4. That's your pickup. How do you know that'll clear the interference? Riker demanded. Because I wrote the protocol, she snapped. The channel went quiet except for the roar of engines. Seconds later, telemetry stabilized. The simulated extraction completed flawlessly. Applause broke out in the observation booth. Callaway exhaled, only now realizing her pulse was hammering. Riker entered moments later, helmet under his arm, expression unreadable. Nice improvisation. It wasn't improvisation, she said. It was training. Still, he admitted, you handled it like someone who's done more than logistics. Callaway met his gaze. You'd be surprised what people are capable of when they're given a chance to do their job. He held her eyes for a beat, then nodded slowly and left. That night, Callaway sat alone on the barracks balcony, a mug of black coffee cooling in her hands. The desert stretched endless and quiet. Somewhere beyond the ridgeline, live-fire drills painted brief flashes of orange against the dark. Her mind replayed the day, the jab, the challenge, the way her hands had moved over controls like they'd never forgotten. Beneath it all lay the memory she couldn't escape. The mission 3 years ago, Kandahar Valley, a trapped SEAL unit, radio silence, command orders to abort. She'd ignored them, dropped below radar, pulled them out under fire. 14 lives, 1 ruined career. A door opened behind her. Winter stepped out, arms folded against the chill. You rattled him today. Riker? Everyone, including the captain. Callaway smiled faintly. Not my intent. Maybe not, but people notice competence, merit, even when they don't know the whole story. Silence stretched. The hum of generators. The faraway thud of artillery. The smell of jet fuel. All the sounds and scents of a world she loved but wasn't allowed to touch. Winters turned to go, then hesitated. There's talk upstairs, she said quietly. Some classified review connected to old operations files. Saber Dawn ring a bell. Callaway's fingers tightened around the mug. No idea, she said evenly. Right. Winters murmured. See you at 07. When she left, Callaway sat motionless, staring into the horizon where the stars blurred into desert haze. Saber Dawn. The mission name had been locked behind clearance levels she no longer held. If someone was digging into it, the past was moving again, and she wasn't sure whether to feel fear or relief. Morning came with the sound of turbines, winding up, the base shimmering in the heat, already rising off the tarmac. Callaway reported to the operations building and found an envelope on her desk marked Command Directive. Eyes only. Inside, a single line. Briefing at 0900. Topic. Operation Saber Dawn declassification. Her pulse slowed, then quickened again, like a pilot adjusting to unexpected altitude. At 0859, the conference room door sealed behind her. Captain Hargrove, the base commander, stood at the head of the table. Riker, Winters, and 3 intelligence officers were already seated. Commander Callaway, Hargrove said, gesturing to an empty chair. Glad you could join us. She sat, back straight, expression neutral. Hargrove tapped a tablet, projecting a classified operations log onto the screen. The words glowed in sterile blue. Operation Saber Dawn, Kandahar Valley extraction. Every muscle in Callaway's body went still. Hargrove continued, voice even. The department has authorized partial declassification for review. We'll be reassessing personnel actions taken as a result of this mission. Riker frowned. What does that have to do with today's training cycle? Hargrove turned to him. You were ground commander the unit extracted that day, correct? Riker nodded slowly. Yes, but the pilot's identity was never released. It was redacted, Hargrove confirmed. Until now. He looked directly at Callaway. Commander Callaway was the pilot. The room fell silent. Riker's face drained of color. That's impossible. The call sign was Phantom, Hargrove finished. Callaway said nothing. She stared at the glowing screen, watching her past come alive in sterile text. Flight path deviations, disciplinary notes, commendation recommendations buried under classified tags. Riker's voice dropped. You broke formation, disobeyed direct orders, and brought your team home, she said quietly. He stood there, searching her expression for something, arrogance, vindication, anger, but found only fatigue. Winters exhaled softly, the only one who seemed unsurprised. I think the lesson plan just changed, Captain. Hargrove nodded. Indeed it has. He switched off the display. We reconvene tomorrow at 0900. Commander Callaway, you'll brief the class on decision-making under extreme operational stress. Yes, sir, she replied. Riker didn't move as the others filed out. Only when the door closed did he speak. 3 years. And you never said a word. It was classified, she answered. That's not what I meant. She met his eyes at last. I know. Outside, sunlight struck the flight line like fire on steel. The same F-35 waited beyond the hangar doors, silent, unflown, yet somehow aware. Callaway walked toward it slowly, each step echoing across the concrete. Somewhere behind her, Riker watched from the window, the weight of revelation pressing down like gravity. For the first time, he saw not the logistics officer he'd mocked, but the ghost who had once flown through enemy fire to save his men. And for the first time, he wondered what it felt like to live with that kind of silence. The next morning, the Mojave sky burned pale gold, a thin line of light spilling over the ridges and hangars of Edwards Air Force Base. Heat shimmered off the tarmac even before sunrise. To the west, an F-35 crouched like a sleeping predator beneath its shelter, its matte skin catching the dawn in quiet flashes. Captain Emily Callaway walked toward it, flight suit crisp, boots silent, helmet under her arm. Around her, crews moved with mechanical rhythm. Fueling hoses, power cables, maintenance chatter. But as she passed, the rhythm faltered. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. Everyone on this base had heard something about the woman the SEAL commander had humiliated in front of half the officer corps yesterday. The rumor was that she'd been grounded for insubordination years ago. Another said she'd panicked in combat. Some said she was just a token face brought in for optics. She ignored them all. Inside the briefing room, Commander Riker was already waiting, arms folded, eyes tracking her as she entered. On the projection wall, a mission schematic blinked to life. Blue lines tracing simulated waypoints over the Sierra corridor. Morning, Captain, he said, his tone clipped professional, almost civil. You'll be leading today's systems demonstration. She glanced at the schematic. Simulated interdiction? Correct, he said. Scenario involves engaging rogue UAV swarms, AI-driven threats. You'll demonstrate how manual pilot response stacks against automated intercept systems. He turned toward the rest of the small team, instructors, analysts, flight engineers. Callaway will fly the F-35 manually. Hayes will monitor the autonomous control feed. I want clear performance metrics. Callaway's jaw tightened. So I'm flying without system assist? That's the idea. There was the same edge from yesterday, disguised under professionalism. A test meant to prove a point. Permission to speak freely? She asked. Riker nodded once. If this is just another humiliation exercise, Commander, you should at least pick an honest objective. The room froze. He held her stare for a long second. Then, almost imperceptibly, his tone softened. It's not a joke, Callaway. You said you wanted to fly. Prove the instinct still matters. Their eyes locked, A silent duel neither wanted, both understood. 30 minutes later, the F-35 roared down the runway, sunlight blazing across its fuselage. Inside the cockpit, Callaway's hands moved with precise fluidity. Throttles, flaps, diagnostics. Her breathing was steady. The world below flattened into desert, runway lines shrinking into gray veins. Raven 1, you're clear on Vector 270, came Riker's voice through the comm. Copy, Control, she replied, climbing through 10,000. Her HUD came alive, a constellation of green icons pulsing on the canopy. 4 simulated bogies blinked into existence, representing AI-controlled drones entering her airspace. Hayes' voice crackled in, autonomous system online, tracking same intercept course. In the control room, Riker watched from behind the glass. Technicians leaned in over displays, tracking telemetry and comparative algorithms. Let's see what instinct buys us, he muttered. On screen, the autonomous drones moved like synchronized predators. Perfect geometry, unflinching precision. Callaway, by contrast, flew in curves, subtle deviations that seemed almost sloppy, until they weren't. Raven 1, you're drifting off optimal intercept vector, Hayes reported. Not drifting, she replied, eyes narrowing, predicting. Her sensors pinged. 2 drone targets broke formation, AI adaptation. She banked left hard, throttling into the sun, losing lock intentionally. Riker leaned forward. What is she doing? Breaking radar contact. Hayes said, confused. Then, a sudden double ping, target reacquired from above. Callaway devoured the sun, inverted nose down, and killed both bogies in one sweep of virtual cannon fire before the AI could compensate. Inside the control room, someone let out a low whistle. Riker said nothing. The next pair came from behind. Faster, evasive. She pulled high G turns that pushed her to the edge of blackout, then dropped throttle mid-loop, forcing pursuers to overshoot before rolling behind them. Target 3 and 4 neutralized, she reported coolly. The simulation board lit up, manual pilot. 4 autonomous, 0. Silence in the control room. Then one of the engineers murmured, impossible. The AI models can't even predict those vector breaks. Riker's eyes stayed on the display. He saw the same pattern. Chaotic precision. Like someone who knew the algorithm too well. He keyed the comm again. Raven 1, you've got clearance to RTB. Mission success. Copy that, she said, voice calm. Returning to base. As she brought the jet back toward the landing strip, the F-35 caught the morning light again, banking gently above the desert. Riker didn't speak for a full minute. He simply watched the flight telemetry scroll across the screens, readings so perfect they looked impossible. When he finally turned to the others, his voice was measured. Class dismissed. Debrief at 1400. By mid-afternoon, the heat shimmered like glass across the tarmac. Riker found her alone beside the aircraft, still in her flight suit, gloves tucked into her belt, gaze fixed on the horizon. You could have told me, he said quietly. Told you what? She replied, not turning. That you still had flight instincts like that. You made the system look obsolete. She smiled faintly. You didn't ask. He hesitated. Just enough for vulnerability to creep through the command posture. When I push you into this demo, it wasn't personal. The Pentagon wants proof that human pilots can still outperform automation. You gave it to them. She looked at him finally, her expression unreadable. Don't make it sound noble, Commander. You just wanted to see if I'd fail. He didn't deny it. Why'd you come back, Callaway? He asked after a pause. After 3 years grounded, why not walk away? She exhaled, eyes drifting toward the flight line. Because the sky doesn't forgive you when you run from it. There was something in her tone, not bitterness, but grief. A kind of wound Riker recognized, but didn't dare probe. Before he could speak again, a voice called from the hangar entrance. Colonel Hargrove, base commander. Both of you. Briefing room. Now. The debrief room was dark, cool, windowless. A massive projection screen displayed classified footage. Combat camera feeds from years past. Dated 2020. Tagged. Saber Dawn. Kandahar Province. Riker frowned. This is restricted material. Hargrove ignored him. You both want to know why Callaway was grounded? Watch. The footage rolled, grainy night vision from a cockpit cam. A friendly unit trapped in a canyon. Anti-air fire streaking upward. Then, a voice crackled through the comms. Calm, female, steady under fire. This is Phantom, engaging hostiles. Hold your position, you're covered. The jet in the footage dropped to near-suicidal altitude, cutting through tracer fire, neutralizing targets one by one. Then static, explosion, end the recording. Hargrove paused the footage, turned to Riker. That op saved 27 lives, including your team, Commander. Riker's jaw clenched. My team? Hargrove's gaze didn't waver. You were on the ground in Kandahar. That was your extraction route. You filed the after-action. Report yourself. Riker blinked. Processing. Phantom was... Callaway said nothing. The colonel crossed his arms. She was hit by ground fire on Exfil. Landed the jet with no hydraulics. The Pentagon classified the file and reassigned her under disciplinary review to cover the data loss. She never contested it. Silence pressed against the walls. Callaway finally spoke, voice quiet. I didn't need a medal. I needed my pilots to get home. Riker stood frozen. That call sign, Phantom, echoed in his memory like a ghost returning from sand and fire. But Hargrove wasn't done. He turned to him and said, Commander, you ordered a retreat that left her without support. You remember now. Riker's breath caught. The room felt suddenly smaller. He looked at her, this quiet, grounded captain he had mocked, and saw the outline of the same F-35 from that night's footage, diving through flak to protect men she'd never met. The air between them filled with the unspoken truth, heavy and suffocating. But she didn't gloat, didn't flinch. She just looked at him, steady, calm, unarmed. And that silence was louder than any accusation. The briefing ended with no words of judgment. Hargrove dismissed them both, leaving the room in utter stillness. Outside, the evening wind howled softly against the hangar walls. The desert horizon bled orange and red, the kind of sunset that looked like burning memory. Riker followed her out, but kept his distance. He watched her pause beside the same jet she'd flown that morning, fingertips brushing its smooth surface. For the first time, he saw what he hadn't before, not a relic of a past mistake, but a soldier who carried the weight of the system's failure and still chose to fly. Tomorrow, she'd face them all again. The officers, the whispers, the doubt. But for now, in the dying light, Captain Emily Callaway stood alone beside the machine that had almost destroyed her, and quietly she smiled. Because ghosts didn't need to haunt the sky. Sometimes, they returned to reclaim it. The desert night hung heavy over Edwards Air Force Base, a blanket of quiet punctuated only by distant engines and the occasional metallic clatter from a flight line. The glow of the hangar lights reflected off the polished surfaces of F-35's line like sentinels in waiting. Inside one of the briefing rooms, a hush had settled over the assembled officers, instructors, and analysts. The air was thick with anticipation. Captain Emily Callaway entered last, her steps deliberate and controlled. The weight of yesterday's simulation and the footage from Sabre Dawn lingered in her mind like a shadow. Every eye in the room seemed to gravitate toward her, curiosity and speculation practically vibrating through the air. Few could have guessed the magnitude of what had happened years ago, and fewer still could have comprehended that the very woman who had been the subject of whisper rumors and office gossip was the one who had flown into the heart of enemy fire to save dozens of lives. Riker waited at the front, standing rigidly by the projection console. He had barely slept. The memory of that night in Kandahar, combined with the footage and the realization that the legendary Phantom was sitting among them, pressed on his chest like a vice. He knew the moment of truth was near, but nothing could have prepared him for the intensity of it. Hargrove entered, commanding the room with the same quiet authority that had defined his career. "All right," he said, voice carrying effortlessly over the tense room. "The purpose of today's session is to finalize the declassification review for Operation Sabre Dawn and formally acknowledge the personnel involved. We will begin with a recap of the mission footage. The lights dimmed, and the familiar night vision imagery filled the room again. The canyon, the embattled team, the tracers. It was all there, raw and unfiltered. But this time, Callaway's presence made every movement, every decision more immediate, more human. Notice the approach vector. Hargrove's voice guided, calm but precise. The pilot executes maneuvers that would be considered reckless by conventional standards. Yet, the outcome saved 27 personnel, including Commander Riker's team, on the ground. Riker's eyes were fixed on the screen, heart hammering. He remembered every tactical decision he had made that night, every radio call, every second spent calculating risk. And yet, watching it now, he realized how little he had actually known. The woman on that screen, fearless, calculated, unflinching, had carried him through hell with nothing but instinct, judgment, and courage. The room fell silent after the footage ended. Everyone understood the weight of what they had just witnessed. Hargrove didn't speak immediately, letting the tension linger, allowing the room to absorb the full measure of her actions. Finally, he said, "Captain Callaway," stepped forward. All eyes turned toward her. She moved with a grace that belied the tension coiling in her chest. Her boots clicked on the floor as she approached the projection console. Riker remained frozen in place, unable to tear his gaze from her. The magnitude of what he was about to witness, what he was about to acknowledge, hit him like a physical force. Hargrove gestured to the screen. For years, the official record obscured certain facts regarding Operation Saber Dawn. Today, that changes. The mission, the heroism, and the decisions made under fire are now declassified. Captain Callaway, the record will officially recognize your actions and the sacrifices you endured in the process. A murmur ran through the room, low but perceptible. People had expected some formal announcement, but nothing on this scale. Not the level of detail, not the acknowledgement of what she had done. Callaway's expression remained composed, but inside, a flood of memories surged. The roar of the F-35 engines over Canyon, the heat of the tracers, the screams, the chaos. The moment she had realized her team's survival rested entirely on her ability to trust instinct over protocol. By order of the Secretary of the Navy, Hargrove continued, voice steady. Captain Emily Callaway's service record is fully restored. Any disciplinary actions associated with Operation Saber Dawn are hereby expunged. Furthermore, in recognition of extraordinary heroism and exceptional airmanship, she is to receive the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. Even the hum of projectors seemed to fade beneath the weight of the announcement. An aide stepped forward with a small velvet box. Hargrove handed it to Callaway, and she accepted it with the same understated professionalism that had defined every aspect of her career. She pinned the medal just above her pilot wings, and a single flash of the F-35 emblem caught in the low light, reflecting her journey, from shadow to recognition, from silence to legend. Riker's throat felt dry. He had expected the announcement, had even known in some abstract sense that the Pentagon intended to acknowledge her heroism, but he hadn't anticipated the personal collision of pride, shame, and awe that now coursed through him. Before he could process it, Hargrove's voice cut across the room. There is one final point. Captain Callaway will assume the role of director of the Advanced Tactical Flight Program here at Edwards. Her mandate: integrate lessons learned from Operation Saber Dawn into all future naval aviation training. Another wave of murmurs rolled through the room. It was one thing to restore a record, to award a medal. It was something else entirely to place her at the very helm of tactical instruction, a living embodiment of judgment under fire. Riker took a hesitant step forward, then stopped, his hands curled into fists at his sides. Years of ingrained respect, competition, and mutual reliance compressed into this single, overwhelming moment. And then, as if compelled by something deeper than protocol or courtesy, he dropped to one knee before her, not in jest, not in ceremony, but in recognition of the debt owed, to the lives she had saved, to the heroism she had silently borne, to the courage he had displayed where he and his team could not. "My men, my life, we owe you everything," he said, voice resonant, carrying across the suddenly hushed room. The effect was instantaneous. One by one, the SEAL team members present mirrored his gesture, kneeling before the woman who had saved them all. Pilots, Officers, instructors. The reverence rippled outward into the room. The hangar, the very air seemed charged with recognition. Callaway's eyes widened fractionally, but she remained composed. Slowly, she extended a hand toward Riker. "Stand, Commander. We all serve together." Riker grasped it, rising, the unspoken apology and acknowledgement of her sacrifice coursing silently between them. Around them, the others followed suit, returning to formal posture, but now with profound respect that went beyond rank or hierarchy. Hargrove stepped back, allowing the moment to exist in its full gravity. This was no stage ceremony, no polished military spectacle. This was a raw acknowledgement of skill, courage, and sacrifice. Callaway turned her gaze to the assembled personnel. Her voice was calm, deliberate. The lesson of Saber Dawn isn't about disobeying orders. It's about understanding that our greatest strength as military aviators lies in human judgment, the capacity to act decisively when every protocol, every regulation, every system tells you otherwise. That judgment saved lives. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Then she added, "Our training must reflect this reality. Not just how to fly, but when to trust your instruments and when to trust yourself." A soft silence followed, punctuated by the occasional shuffle of uniformed feet. Riker looked at her now with a new understanding, not just of the mission, but of the depth of her character. Every instinct, every decision, every action had been deliberate, calculated, courageous, and yet she had carried it quietly, without complaint or self-promotion. The Phantom was no longer a ghost. She was a force recognized at last, in full daylight, with all its consequence. Later, on the flight line, the sun dipped toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Callaway stood beside her F-35, hands resting lightly on the canopy, helmet under arm. The aircraft seemed almost aglow in the fading light, its matte surface reflecting the first hints of evening. Riker approached with measured steps, flanked by a few remaining SEALs and officers. "That was unprecedented," he said quietly. Callaway didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were on the horizon, where distant mountain peaks caught the last rays of sunlight. "It had to be," she said finally. 3 years of silence, misjudgment, and bureaucracy. If it takes an extraordinary measure to correct it, then that's what it takes." Riker nodded. "You made the system look small, and us look small too." She turned to him, expression neutral, but eyes gleaming with controlled intensity. "Sometimes the system is small. The choices we make, in combat and life, are what define us, not the rules written on paper." The wind swept across the flight line, carrying dust and heat, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended between the weight of the past and the promise of the future. "Director," Riker said finally, using her new title, "what's our first order business?" Callaway smiled faintly, following the line of the runway as the first evening flights lifted into the sky, teaching the next generation of pilots that the most important instrument in the cockpit isn't on the panel. The desert darkened. F-35s climbed into twilight, engines roaring, cutting arcs of light across the sky. Phantom's jet waited among them, no longer classified, no longer hidden. The legend had returned, and those who had once doubted her would never forget. The desert dawn broke crisp and clear over Naval Air Station Fallon, the horizon tinged with faint streaks of amber and rose. The base stirred to life with the precision of clockwork. Trucks rumbled across the tarmac. Maintenance crews prepared aircraft for flight, and instructors reviewed training logs. Yet amidst the usual cadence of daily operations, there was an unmistakable tension, a quiet anticipation that pulsed through every corner of the station. Commander Emily Callaway stood on the balcony of the officers' quarters, her uniform immaculate, her wings gleaming under the rising sun. Her gaze swept the flight line, where rows of F-35 stood like sentinels, polished to perfection. Phantom, her aircraft, occupied a central position. Overnight, someone had painted its call sign boldly beneath the cockpit, a silent but unequivocal acknowledgement of her legacy. She allowed herself a moment of stillness. The weight of yesterday's declassification, the medal, the applause, it all hung like a mantle upon her shoulders. Her mind replayed the previous day's events. The kneeling of Riker, the silent acknowledgement by the SEALs, the realization that her heroism was no longer hidden. The recognition had been overwhelming. But what lay ahead was even more consequential. Her role as director of the Advanced Tactical Flight Program carried immense responsibility. The eyes of the Navy, the Air Force, and the next generation of pilots would now look to her for guidance, for judgment, and for the lessons that could not be taught in manuals. Hargrove's voice crackled through the base intercom, firm and authoritative. Attention all personnel. The Advanced Tactical Flight Program will convene a formal orientation on the main parade ground at 0900 hours. All assigned officers, instructors, and trainees are to report in full uniform. Attendance is mandatory. Callaway allowed a wry smile. Discipline, structure, protocol, the same framework she had once challenged, and yet the very essence of what she had defended under fire. She moved quickly, her pace purposeful, heading toward the main parade ground. The morning air carried a sharpness, the chill of the desert slowly giving way to the warmth of the sun. Officers and enlisted personnel had already assembled, standing in formation that reflected both precision and deference. Hargrove greeted her at the perimeter of the formation, nodding curtly. "Director Callaway," he said, "they are all waiting." The enormity of the moment pressed on her, but she walked forward with the same command presence she had once relied upon in the cockpit. Every step was measured, deliberate, as though each carried the weight of both history and expectation. Riker stood at the front, flanked by the SEALs who had survived Kandahar. His eyes found hers, steady, unwavering. There was no need for words. They had shared the battlefield once, and the silent acknowledgement between them spoke volumes. Hargrove stepped aside, gesturing toward the assembled personnel. "Director Callaway, the floor is yours." A hush settled over parade ground. The officers stood at attention, the trainees straight-backed and alert. Even the civilians, contractors unfamiliar with such ceremonies, sensed a gravity. Callaway inhaled, allowing the clarity of purpose to center her thoughts. She spoke, voice steady, resonant, carrying effortlessly across the formation. "Good morning. Today is not merely a procedural gathering. Today is a reaffirmation of what it means to serve with judgment, courage, and accountability." She paused, letting her gaze sweep the assembly. Operation Saber Dawn was more than a mission. It was a crucible, a test of human decision-making under extreme pressure. The lessons we draw from that day are not just about flying skill, not just about following orders. They are about understanding the responsibility we bear for lives entrusted to our care, and the integrity required to exercise judgment when conventional protocols fail. She motioned to Phantom, her aircraft gleaming in the morning light. This program, this fleet, represents a pinnacle of technology, precision, and discipline. But the most important instrument in any cockpit is not mechanical. It is the mind and judgment of the pilot. Discipline and initiative, protocol and instinct, these must exist in balance. A murmur rippled through the formation, officers exchanging glances, some nodding imperceptibly. Trainees listened intently, absorbing not just her words, but the authority and authenticity behind them. Callaway continued, "Starting today, the Advanced Tactical Flight Program will integrate new modules specifically designed to teach decision-making under extreme conditions. Simulations alone are not enough. We will examine historical operations, debrief actual mission outcomes, and provide scenarios where pilots must make judgment calls that cannot be predicted by manuals or software." She paused, walking slowly along the edge of the parade ground. "I will not shield you from responsibility. Mistakes in judgment carry consequences, as they should. But I will ensure you are prepared to make those decisions with clarity, courage, and integrity. The lives of your teams, your fellow pilots, and your nation may one day depend on it." The weight of her words settled over the assembly. It was one thing to train in the simulator. It was another to confront the human element, the unpredictable, chaotic, morally complex reality of combat and crisis. She had lived that reality. She had borne its consequences. And now, she would ensure the next generation of pilots could face it with confidence and competence. Hargrove stepped forward, voice formal but underscored with quiet satisfaction. "All personnel will report for evaluation flights starting tomorrow morning." Director Callaway will oversee all training exercises personally for the next week. Failure to comply with new directives will result in immediate administrative review. The assembly nodded in unison, the disciplined rhythm of military compliance underscoring the seriousness of the message. Even those who had once doubted her capabilities now recognized her authority. Riker moved closer, falling into step beside her as the formation began to disperse. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "Even the officers who resisted yesterday are silent today." Callaway allowed a small smile. "Discipline respects competence, Commander. Once they see the results, obedience follows naturally." They walked in companionable silence toward the flight line, where maintenance crews prepped the aircraft. The hum of engines, the clatter of tools, and the distant whine of turbines created a symphony of readiness. Every movement reflected the culmination of training, the precision demanded by the machines, and the human skill required to command them. A young trainee approached, helmet under arm, eyes wide with awe. "Director Callaway, sir, ma'am, I just want to say thank you for being here. We've heard stories, but seeing you is incredible." Callaway nodded, crouching slightly to meet the trainee's gaze. "Thank you. Remember, it's not the legend you see in stories. It's the choices you make in the moment that define you. Train hard, trust your instincts, and respect the responsibility you bear. That's how you honor your craft." The trainee nodded, inspired, before hurrying to join the next pre-flight briefing. Riker observed quietly, impressed by how naturally Callaway commanded authority, without arrogance. Her presence was both motivating and grounding, a balance that he knew few could achieve. Later, in the Tactical Operations Center, Callaway reviewed the curriculum proposals with instructors and senior pilots. Every detail was scrutinized, every lesson plan dissected for realism and effectiveness. The room was tense but focused, the kind of discipline that bred excellence rather than fear. Hargrove observed from the periphery, noting her approach. "You command respect not just through rank, but through competence and integrity," he said softly. Callaway didn't look up, her attention fixed on the schematics. Discipline isn't about fear or hierarchy. It's about trust in your team, trust in your judgment, trust in the process. Without it, skill alone is meaningless. By midday, the training sorties were underway. Callaway climbed into Phantom, the familiar feel of the cockpit a grounding presence. She ran through pre-flight checks with methodical precision, every switch, dial, and readout scrutinized. The aircraft roared to life, engines screaming, vibrating with controlled fury beneath her. Riker watched from the tower, binoculars tracking her movements. Even from a distance, the synchronicity between pilot and machine was mesmerizing. She moved as if she had become one with the aircraft. Every decision instantaneous, every maneuver precise. As Phantom ascended into the sky, Callaway's voice came through the comms, steady and clear. "Formation Alpha, proceed to waypoint 2. Maintain altitude and heading. Remember, discipline first, initiative second. Adjust only when necessary. Trust your instruments, but trust your judgment more." The trainees responded in kind, executing the directives flawlessly. Callaway's eyes scanned the horizon, assessing each response, analyzing each adjustment. Her teaching was not abstract. It was real, immediate, and consequential. Every correction carried the weight of lives saved or lost. Hours passed in this meticulous rhythm. Flight, debrief, adjustment, repetition. The sun dipped toward the mountains, casting long shadows over the runway. By evening, fatigue was evident on every face, but the results were undeniable. Pilots had improved reaction times, situational awareness, and confidence in decision-making. Riker approached after the final sortie. "You've transformed them," he said quietly. "In one day, you've taken theory and turned it into instinct." Callaway allowed herself a small smile, finally removing her helmet. Discipline and trust are inseparable. Once they see that, they'll carry it into every mission, every cockpit, every decision. That's the true legacy of Saber Dawn. The desert air cooled as twilight descended. Phantom rested at the center of the line, gleaming under the lights. Callaway surveyed the scene, disciplined, efficient, transformed. She had restored her name, proven her judgment, and begun to shape the future. Riker watched her for a moment, admiration tempered by respect. You didn't just reclaim your record today. You redefined what it means to lead. Callaway nodded, her gaze distant, focused on the horizon where sky met desert. Leadership isn't about being seen. It's about ensuring others are ready when it matters most. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of sand and jet fuel, a reminder that this was a world of constant motion, precision, and risk. Yet for the first time in years, Callaway felt a rare sense of peace. The past had been reconciled, the mission honored, the future set in motion. And in the fading light, the desert air seemed to carry a silent acknowledgement of courage, of judgment, and of the enduring power of discipline. The desert morning at Naval Air Station Fallon was sharp and crisp, each ray of sunlight cutting through the chill with precision. The tarmac stretched endlessly, the polished surfaces of F-35s glinting like metal sentinels under the rising sun. There was a sense of electricity in the air, an unspoken tension that came with moments that could define careers, legacies, and even lives. Commander Emily Callaway moved across the parade ground with her boots clicking against the concrete, her uniform pristine, her wings catching the first light. Every detail mattered. Posture, cadence, gaze, each a reflection of the discipline she had honed over years of service. For 3 long years, her record had been clouded by bureaucracy, by rules that punish initiative in the name of protocol. Those years have been a quiet torment. Missions flown in shadows, accolades denied, and a career paused in unjust limbo. But today, all of that would change. Today, history would be corrected, and the pilot known only as Phantom would finally step into the light of recognition she had long earned. Hargrove fell into step beside her, his presence a steadying one. "Director Callaway," he said, voice measured but with a hint of pride. "Everything is prepared." The secretary's representative insisted the announcement be public and immediate. They requested the full assembly. Callaway nodded, absorbing the gravity of the moment. The parade ground stretched before her, like a living map of the Navy's might. Enlisted personnel, officers, and civilian contractors stood in near-perfect formation, the discipline of their posture matched only by the anticipation radiating from every face. Commander Riker, standing slightly apart, caught her eye. His expression was unreadable, professional, yet there was something beneath the surface. Respect, gratitude, perhaps even awe. He nodded subtly, acknowledging the shared history they carried silently between them. Kandahar, the extraction, the risks that had nearly claimed them all. Admiral Ella Laner West stepped forward to the microphone, her presence commanding immediate attention. "At ease," she ordered, and the collective formation relaxed, though the undercurrent of focus remained. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle before she spoke again. 3 years ago, an F-35 pilot with the call sign Phantom executed an extraction mission that defied the limits of what our simulations classified as survivable. 14 lives were saved that day, but because the pilot acted outside of direct orders, she was removed from flight duty, her record blemished unjustly. Callaway felt the quiet tension around her. She maintained her composure, standing at attention, but inwardly, she let herself feel the surge of vindication. The injustice that had lingered for years was finally being confronted. "Today," West continued, "with the declassification of Operation Saber Dawn, we correct that injustice." Commander Merritt Callaway stepped forward. Every step Callaway took felt deliberate, heavy with the significance of what was about to unfold. The desert wind stirred lightly, ruffling flags and lifting the faint scent of aviation fuel from the tarmac. She reached the stage, her eyes briefly scanning the formation. Hundreds of personnel, each representing a part of the military ecosystem she had served, watched her. Some faces were familiar. Some were those of young trainees who had only heard tales of Phantom's legendary extraction. All of them now bore witness. West faced her directly. "By direct order of the Secretary of the Navy, your service record is restored to full status. All disciplinary actions related to Operation Saber Dawn are hereby expunged. Furthermore, in recognition of your extraordinary courage, skill, and devotion to duty, you are awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor." The aide approached with a velvet box. Callaway's hand, steady as always, accepted the medal, feeling the weight of its significance more than the weight of its metal. West pinned it above her wings. Applause erupted across the parade ground, spontaneous, genuine, and sustained. Callaway remained at attention, her face composed, though the storm of emotion inside her could no longer be fully contained. West gestured for her to address the personnel. The silence it felt was tangible, every breath held, every eye fixed on her. "Thank you, Admiral West," Callaway began, voice calm yet resonant. "I accept this recognition not for myself alone, but for every aviator, every team member, every individual who has faced impossible decisions in the line of duty. Operation Sabre Dawn was not just a test of flying skill. It was a test of judgment, of trust, and of courage. These lessons are what we must carry forward, not just in manuals or simulations, but in the hearts and minds of every service member under our command." Her eyes moved across the assembly, finally landing on Riker and his team. She offered a subtle nod, acknowledgement without ceremony, gratitude without words. They had survived Kandahar because of training, instinct, and mutual trust. Now, they had the chance to honor the choices that had saved them. The desert air seemed to still as Riker stepped forward, breaking the disciplined rhythm of the formation. He did not salute. He did not speak in protocol. Instead, he knelt. One knee pressed the ground in a gesture as old as warfare itself. A warrior's recognition of debt, of respect, of something beyond rank or regulation. "The lives of my men, my life," Riker said, voice carrying over the assembled personnel. "We owe you everything." The moment held. Then, almost instinctively, one by one, the SEALs began to kneel. Pilots followed. Officers, enlisted personnel, and trainees fell to one knee, until only Callaway, West, and Hargrove remained standing. The act was spontaneous, yet it radiated with clarity. Respect earned, recognition long delayed, acknowledgement profound. Callaway extended her hand to Riker. "Stand, Commander. We all serve together." He took it, rising. The others followed, restoring formation but with subtle shift. The discipline of military precision now carried something more, honor and gratitude entwined with every posture, every gaze. West returned to the microphone. "Dismissed," she ordered. Personnel dispersed, but the energy lingered, conversations buzzing with the stories of bravery, judgment, and the rare courage to act when protocol would condemn success. Callaway accepted congratulations with grace, each interaction a reminder that the past 3 years had not been lived in vain. Later, on the flight line, Callaway watched as her F-35, Phantom, gleamed under the descending sun. Riker approached with his SEAL team, each member offering a personal acknowledgement. "The team wanted to thank you personally," Riker said. "Most never knew who pulled us out that day." Callaway nodded, absorbing the weight of their words. These were not ceremonies or medals. These were the human acknowledgments that carried the deepest significance. "You didn't just reclaim your record today," Riker said softly. "You redefined what leadership truly means." Callaway allowed herself a small smile. Leadership isn't about recognition. It's about ensuring others are prepared when it matters most. The first training flights of the evening began. Jets screamed down the tarmac, ascending with disciplined precision. Callaway tracked each movement, noting the balance of training, intuition, and human judgment. She reflected on the young pilots, imagining them facing impossible decisions where instinct and judgment would be as critical as the controls beneath their hands. Her responsibility now was clear. She would ensure that every new aviator understood that skill alone was not enough. Courage, judgment, and integrity mattered equally. As the sun dipped behind the western mountains, casting the desert in shades of crimson and gold, Callaway performed pre-flight checks on Phantom. The aircraft responded with familiarity, each system humming with quiet precision. Beneath the cockpit, the call sign, Phantom, now officially painted, reflected the recognition of her years in shadow. She lifted off, climbing into the fading light, the desert air crisp against her visor. Each maneuver was executed with skill and grace, a living demonstration of what the Navy had reclaimed in her. Above, the horizon stretched endlessly, limitless opportunity, endless responsibility. Riker remained in the control tower, observing. "Teaching them to trust themselves," he murmured, almost to himself. That's the real lesson of Saber Dawn. Callaway's voice came over the comms. Formation Alpha, maintain heading. Altitude adjustments only when necessary. Discipline first, initiative second. Trust your training, but trust your judgment more. Every pilot followed her guidance, a living embodiment of the lessons she had learned, suffered for, and now could impart. The desert night settled over Fallon, cool and quiet, the flight line glowing with soft illumination. Phantom rested among its peers, no longer just a machine, but a symbol of human judgment, courage, and resilience. And beside it, Commander Emily Callaway had reclaimed not just a record, but the principles upon which true military excellence is built. She reflected on her journey. The extraction that had nearly claimed lives, the sidelining that had tested patience and perseverance, and the ultimate recognition that had affirmed years of service and judgment. Some prices are worth paying. Some battles are worth fighting. And some heroes, long hidden in shadows, finally emerge into the recognition they deserve. As darkness fell, Callaway stood on the tarmac, silhouetted against the glowing line of F-35s. The desert night whispered of possibilities, of missions yet to fly, pilots yet to train, lives yet to influence. The legacy of Phantom, of Saber Dawn, would live on in every decision made in the cockpit, every lesson passed to the next generation, every choice where courage must triumph over fear and judgment over blind obedience. And for those watching, for those who had ever doubted whether integrity, courage, and human judgment were enough, Callaway's story now stood as living proof. The heart of service is not found in protocol alone, but in the choices we make when no one is watching. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that courage and integrity often go unseen before recognition comes, then don't miss the next story. Subscribe to the Heart Listen Stories, and press the bell icon to get regular updates. Join our community of listeners who believe in the power of human courage, redemption, and the moments that define true heroes. Your next journey, your next story of the heart, is just a click away.